Hoglan on drums. Speaking of Gene Hoglan, he's currently on the line from LA. Hi, Gene. Welcome to Rainy Metal.
Hey there, Keith. How are you, man? Welcome. Thank you very much. Greetings to all the raining metal audience out there. Very cool, man.
For those who haven't heard of you, who are some of the bands that you've played with?
Holy moly, it's easier to talk about the bands I have not played with. And I tell you, man, I've been with just about every metal band on the planet. And Darkness Descends there from Dark Angel. That was my debut album, but that was the band's second album. Their first album was called We Have Arrived, and that was released before I was in the band. But let me see. I'll try to go kind of as chronologically as I can, I guess. It was Dark Angel, then Death, then Strapping Young Lad, and Testament. Let me see. Got just a million others. Dethklok. I did a moment in that band Fear Factory. I think we did Australia as well. I believe, maybe. Yeah, we did with
Yeah, you did,
Metallica.
yeah.
That's
Yep.
right. And yeah, we got Dethklok, and that's been very active of late. Good old Dethklok has been. And let me see what else. I've worked with Devin Townsend outside of Strapping Young Lad a million times, and I tell you, the best thing I would tell anybody is just go to Wikipedia. I could probably tell you a lot more about my stuff than I could pull off the top of my head.
Yeah, so it's been a couple of bands.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, totally.
Okay, at what age did you start playing the drums and what got you into it?
Well, I would say that, I began playing air drums in earnest when I was about 8 years old. So that would have been yeah, 7 or 8. Yeah, I was probably 1976. So yeah, man, about to turn 9. Yeah, so I was probably 8. And I swear to God, man, my stint doing air drums before I ever got a drum kit, that was an amazing way to learn drums. It's not like I was just goofing around there, just waggling my arms around. I was actually pretending to play drums and trying as best as I could to play along to Kiss songs and Aerosmith and Ted Nugent and Queen and Black Sabbath and all my early favorite bands. And then I got my very first drum kit when I was 13 years old. And by the time I got my kit, I sat on the kit the first time, and I wasn't too shabby. I already kind of had a pretty decent just a ability to get myself around the kit pretty easily from 5 years of air drumming. So that's pretty cool. So I guess I've been playing drums officially now for 41 years. I tell you.
You were once a roadie for Slayer, including singing backing vocals on a track they were recording on the Show No Mercy album and introducing Dave Lombardo into the double kick. Can you tell us about it?
Well, yeah, actually, I was, a lot of people think I was Dave's drum tech, but I was actually their light guy. And that just came about because, I'd been pals with the band, and this was back when Slayer was still in the clubs. And at that time, 1983, early 1984, they were just so over the top heavy that, you know, LA metal in 1983, like it was starting to just turn into that radio hard rock, cock rock, whatever, hair metal, whatever
Yeah.
whatever people want to refer to it. But that was kind of the inception of it, was right around 82, 83 was when it started really coming about. And you had bands like Metallica, Slayer, Armored Saint, a number of other super Dark Angel. I mean, Dark Angel was playing gigs before I was in the band, doing lots of gigs with Slayer and that kind of thing. So, at that point in time, Slayer was just so damned heavy and just brutal and all that stuff that they were too heavy for the typical LA crowd, kind of thing. Um, and so that's why they would, they had a following of about, a hardcore following of about 30 people. And I was one of those folks. And, Tom and I became friends, and I became friends with the whole band there. And one time their light guy uh, just didn't show up. And Slayer had a pretty decent light show for the time. For at the time, I'm sure there's some YouTubes out there, showing they had these triangle lights set up behind Dave, and their guy didn't show up. And so Tom just turned to me, and he was, it was like 10 minutes before the show. He's like, "Hey, man, our light guy isn't going to make it tonight. Do you?" He points at the little, you know, rudimentary light board.
Yeah.
It was a tiny little 8-button thing, tiny club in L.A. And he just pointed at that board and said, "Hey, man, do you think you could manage that board and do some lights for us tonight?" And I was like, "Sure, man, no problem." I'd never done anything like that before. I was about 15 at the time, and so I was able to get through the show. It was great. It was killer. And then, I mean, Slayer was playing once to twice a week. About 5 to 6 gigs a month, kind of, at that time. And the next week, exact same thing transpired. Tom's like, "Our light guy isn't going to make it here again, so can you mind doing it again?" And so I jumped on it again. And then it just got to the point where I was going to all the Slayer shows. Didn't matter what day of the week it was. A lot of them were on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And, I was still in school for all that. But I would just show up at the club, go straight to the light board. Slayer comes on stage. I do their lights. And when it was time for them to hit the road on their Haunting the West Coast tour, um, Tom had to approach my parents to see if I could go on the road with them, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Yeah, you're a minor, dude. I gotta talk to your folks about this." So yeah, my folks were like, "God, take him, keep him,
Hey.
get this kid out of here, man." So that was pretty cool. So I hit the road when I was 16 with Slayer, and that was their first extended road trip. They had been making a number of trips up to the Bay Area and playing with, like, Exodus and all the kick-ass local bands, Laws Rocket, all that kind of stuff. And but then, when they hit the road for a real West Coast jaunt, I was one of the guys on that. And so a number of months before that, about, I don't know, 9 months or so before that tour happened, um, they were recording. It was in October of 1983. They were recording Show No Mercy, and I've mentioned this story a million times. Um, it was time for Jeff and Carrie to go do their backing vocals, and I said this very recently in an interview. It was there was Tom and Carrie sitting on a couch at the studio, and I just said, "Hey guys, man, you guys ever thought of, like, having a big old gang of dudes go in and do the evil, because it used, like I've mentioned it, like I said, it used to be Carrie and Jeff going, "Evil, my words defy evil." It,
Yeah.
it it wasn't very spooky, and it was just an idea, and they looked at each other and they said, "Hey man, great idea. No time like the present. Everybody get in the vocal booth." And so that's how that came about. So there you go. Well, how that went down was, I remember in summer of '83, Dave had pulled out the double bass, and he played a show with double bass. I remember it was some outdoor festival with a whole bunch of the LA quote unquote metal bands, in Pico Rivera. I remember that. And he had the double bass going for that. I was like, "All right, man, Dave's rocking the double bass, kick ass." And then when they went in to record Show No Mercy, he was back down to the single bass. And I remember asking him, like, "Dave, whatever happened? You had the double bass going for a while." He's like, "Man, I just wasn't getting it. I, I, I wasn't able to, like, get it together in time for the album." I'm like, "Okay, well, there you go, man." Because I was thinking there's songs like Antichrist and Cryonics and songs like that would have been really just, having the double bass just chugging along, and those songs
Yeah.
would have been super kick ass. But he did the album with single bass. And then a few months later, he brought out the double kick again and started really trying to woodshed on it. And I went over to Tom's place one day. That's where they would rehearse. And I'm sure everybody's seen photos up around of them in their rehearsal space. Um, and David brought out the double bass again. And again, he was like, man, I am just not getting this thing. I'm just not quite pulling this together. I was like, well, shoot, man. I don't know. Let me take a seat. Let me see. Let me see if I can help you out. And I knew what Dave. Well, I assumed what Dave was trying to play. Kind of like the praise of death chorus, or even no, not the chorus, like the angel of death chorus. That kind of beat. The downbeat, the quote unquote backwards thrash beat with flying double bass. I just assumed that was what he was trying to figure out, because that was really about the most neato kind of double bass that could be happening at that time.
Yep.
And so I just sat down and I just started flying at it. And Dave was like, "Dude, what the hell? When did you get a double bass? I've been to your house. I've played your drums. You play a single bass kit. When did you get double bass? How long have you been playing double bass?" And I'm serious. I look at my watch. I'm like, I don't know. What time is it? This is the first time, this is the first time I've ever played double bass. And he's like, damn, dude. Okay, well, and he just got right to it. He's like, okay, tell me what you're doing. Show me what's going through your mind. What are you doing? And I started explaining to him. I'm like, well, I'm concentrating a lot on my left foot. He's like, that's my biggest problem. I'm like, well, as you can see, I'm trying to make sure my left foot is coming down with the proper hand it should be coming down with. He's like, okay, that's my big issue too. And so I just gave him some tips. I'm like, well, here's what I'm doing right now. And I just ran him through what was going through my head, right off the top of my head. And he's like, got it. Let me get on this now. And then the next tune that came out of him was the mighty Haunting the Chapel. So that was pretty badass. And I remember being at the Haunting the Chapel EP recording session, and just giving him, just words of encouragement, like, you got this, Dave. Come on, man. I was standing in the bathroom, which is right next to the drums themselves. I got the door almost closed. I'm like, you're kicking ass, head. Pay attention to your left foot. You're killing it. Way to go, Dave. And I'd shut the door and he'd get to his tunes and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's pretty fun.
So, with him being sort of like a double kick master now, do you feel proud that what you've achieved in David to develop his drumming skills?
Well, I've always considered what I did was, relatively minor. I mean, the man had to do the work himself. So,
Yeah.
so I have a very small part in that. He's the person who put the time and the effort in order to get his chops to the degree that he did. So there you go. But yeah, man, Dave's done a great job. He's done not too shabby for himself with his career, I tell you.
No, that's true. Um, if a band called you to record an album and go out and tour, which band would you drop everything for at the last minute to help out?
Let me see. Rush, absolutely. If
Okay.
Getty, if Getty and Alex decided they wanted to, pay a great tribute to Mr. Neil Peart, I would absolutely take the Pepsi challenge with anybody, and I would be like, "I'm your man, gentlemen. There you go. There's one." Um, but I tell you, I sure hope nobody does that. I sure hope nobody does call me up and say, "Drop everything, come out," and because I'm so effing busy these days.
Yes.
But there you go. I'd love to play for Stevie Wonder. I'd love to play for effing Parliament Funkadelic. And if hey man, if Slayer decided that, hey man, well, we're not gonna have Dave, we're not gonna have Paul, I'd be like, dude, I'll help you guys out. Absolutely. Metallica, of course. I would be remiss not to mention one of the big old gigantor bands like that. So there you go, man. Absolutely.
What's one of your favourite tracks to play live?
I've always said this. One of my favorite tracks to play live is by by the band Death, and that is the song "Flattening of Emotions" from the Human album. That is such an amazing song on the drums. It's really fun. I loved playing the Death, the Human era Death material, and I've always loved, even when Mr. Sean Reinert was with us, I always loved paying as much of an homage to his style as I could. I am not too shabby of a mimic when I need to be. If there's, because there's a lot of drum patterns and drum songs and drum performances, like the aforementioned Mr. Neil Peart. I mean, if you're going to play a Rush song, you want to play that thing as close to the original as humanly possible. That like people have come to expect a certain approach, and so there you go. But yeah, man, I love playing out. I love the Dethklok material. I love playing the song Andromeda from Dethklok. That's always a real fun workout on the drums, and songs by Strapping Young Lad. I love Skeksis. That's one of my favorite songs ever to play on drums. So that's pretty darn cool.
Okay.
There's a million of them.
What was it like to finally get out and play live again with Dethklok?
That was great. God, we had a great time at the show. We just played the show last Sunday, actually. What are we
Mm-hmm.
on today? Friday. So yeah, like 4 or 5 days ago. That was great, man. It's like Dethklok is such a fun band to play with, to play for, and that fun comes from, of course, the music is effing amazing in my opinion. Excuse me. But also working with Brendan Small. Brendan is great. I love working with Brendan. He's, as a lot of the world might have known if they follow Brendan's social media feed, they might have come to know that the day before we left for that gig in Philadelphia, Brendan got all of his guitars stolen, or 13 of his main axes were
Oh,
stolen, and
wow.
um, out of his home studio. And I mean, the poor man going through that kind of thing, and then you can't even really be around for it. You're trying to
Nah.
talk at the cops, you're trying to network with some people that might be able to give you a line on where maybe to find your guitars. He's got to pick up and head, across the country to do a gig.
Huh.
And Brendan has always, always, always been so cool as a cucumber. He handled everything amazingly, just like Brendan does. I mean, if anybody's ever seen any interviews with him or anything's on YouTube's from Brendan, that is Brendan. He's a very genuine person, and the man just got a serious knife to the heart.
Yeah.
Those were his axes. And as he was explaining, he was like, you know, of course, they're just guitars. I understand that. And some of those guitars were, I had sentimental value for. There was my personal Thunder Horse guitar, the prototype for that. That's now gone. A gift from Joe Satriani guitar
Oh,
that
wow.
Joe Satriani traveled the world with for years. That's a sentimental value. If I don't get that guitar back, ow. Steve Vai, same situation. A guitar Steve Vai's used for years and years. That was a gift to Brendan. So, I mean, that I know it hurts,
Mm.
and the invasiveness of having. It's not like they were stolen out of the back of a, a, a trailer or out of a rehearsal studio. They were taken from his studio, his personal studio. So that's not fun,
No.
and so our hearts go out to Brendan. He's handling it like an absolute master, but still, we don't want to see our friend going through any kind of pain, because that man deserves all the success that he gets, and none of the pain that he is probably personally receiving right now through all of this. So
N-
our hearts are with Brendan, absolutely. But the show went great. It was killer. He did a great job. We all did. Uh, Pete Griffin on bass, Neely Brosh on guitar. Um, my wife, Laura Christine, also jumps on stage and plays with Dethklok. She got COVID right before the rehearsals, so she couldn't
Oh,
make it with us. So, she was going through just kind of a little personal kick in the gut with that. Like, oh man,
yeah,
COVID, couldn't you wait 2 months?
yeah.
that kind of thing. So all of that, but the show was great, and it was fantastic getting out to play some Dethklok shows. And for those who pay attention, there's a whole lot of Dethklok news happening these days, and all of it is super exciting. So there you go.
What other projects are you currently working on?
Well, in about 3 or 4 days, Dark Angel heads over to Europe to do a couple of festival shows, and then I am currently writing the next Dark Angel record, and then we are also working on, well, God, Brendan announced the movie on stage last week, so we are working on some of the movie musical project for the Dethklok movie. I've finished a big round of work for the movie, and then in September we have another round of work for the movie, or for Dethklok in general coming up, and so that's going to be real exciting. And then there's some Dark Angel shows coming up as well. We just got back from a Death to All European run, which was fantastic. That was great. It was great to get Death to All back together and go out and play some death music with my brothers, Steve DiGiorgio, Bobby Coble,
Yep.
Max Phelps, and that that was great. It was really awesome. That was my first time on the road since COVID hit, since the
Mm.
pandemic hit. So that was my first like serious road work. I've done a couple of spot dates here and there, but for an actual tour, that was my first. Steve's been out on the road with Testament since April, something like that. April, March, something like that. So that's been pretty steady for Steve.
Okay.
And so that was great for all of our schedules to kind of come together, for us to have a moment to break out and do some kick-ass death material and play a killer homage to Chuck Schuldiner every
Mm-hmm.
night. That was a blast, and that will always be a blast every time we get to do it. So there you go there. And 2023 is going to be chock full of tons of stuff. So I'm already starting to get my deep into 2023 is getting booked like crazy. So we'll see where that takes us.
Okay. If you weren't a musician, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Time. Yeah, man, just that kind of thing. No, I if I weren't a musician, I have a feeling I would be a music journalist,
Okay.
because I've always loved music, man, since I was two. My parents used to tell me it's about the time when, the Santana song came on the radio, and it was a song called "No One to Depend On," and I was two, but I insisted that my parents take me down to the record store and pick me up that single. And since then, I've just had a love affair with music. And so I have a feeling that, because I was a little bit of a music journalist before I started getting into bands, for a lot of fanzines and that kind of thing. So I have a feeling that that could be what I would be doing.
Okay. I last seen you playing in Sydney with Dark Angel, which was a killer show. When do you think you'll be back in Australia again?
That's a good question. I mean, it's all kind of pandemic related. I'm hearing that Australia is starting to open up again
Yep.
a little bit, so that's good. So I'm hoping that it would be sooner than later, and whether it be Dark Angel or Death to All or Dethklok or hell all three at once, I'm fine with all of that. I tell you. So
Yeah, bring all three at once. That'd be good.
yeah, man, I'm all for it.
You might
Totally.
you might be a bit tired at the end playing in all three bands, but
But hell, I'm young and studly, so I could pull it off, no problem.
yeah, why not? Yeah, yeah, bring all three. That'd be great.
That would be.
That'd be fantastic. Okay, well, Gene, I'd like to thank you for the chat, and hope to see you back in Australia real soon.
Right on, Keith. Well, I appreciate it, and best of luck to you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I hope to see all of my Australian friends very soon. Hail Zordabo, darn tootin'.
I'd like to finish up with Gene playing drums on Def's 1993 album Individual Thought Patterns, which is one of my favourite tracks of The Philosopher. Once again, Gene, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Keith. You take care.